to evict members of the Masaai Indigenous community in Loliondo in the country's northern district of Ngorongoro. Now, the country has begun relocating Maasai pastoralists from the famed Ngorongoro conservation area in a move that rights campaigners describe as unlawful evictions. The indigenous community has lived in the reserve, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in northern Tanzania, for over a century, but they now face being moved out as the authorities contend that their growing population is a threat to wildlife habitat. Officials insist the relocation is voluntary. The nomadic Maasai people consider the area lying on the outskirts of the Serengeti National Park as ancestral land essential to their livelihood of keeping livestock and guaranteeing food for the community. A change in its status would mean the banning of human activities or settlement there. An estimated 80,000 Maasai from their ancestral land live there. Deprose Muchena is the Amnesty International Regional Director for East and Southern Africa. He joins us now to talk about this. A very good evening to you, Deprose, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, let's just first start with what human rights activists and campaigners say they have observed. We've mentioned their government saying that it's a voluntary exercise, but we've had reports that about 30 Maasai have been hurt via live ammunition being fired while protesting this move. What are the reports that you're hearing?
Well, thank you very much, Sepi. So it's unfortunate development in Tanzania, which mirrors part of the skirmishes that we continue to see on the continent between governments and indigenous people to the lands who are settled on ancestral land, and they are usually forcibly evicted to make or pave way for what governments would call economic development projects. And in the particular case that we're dealing with here, we're looking at a situation of more than 70,000 indigenous Maasai people being at risk of being displaced forcibly from their ancestral lands to make way for a tourism operation. And what happened is that on the 9th of June, the Tanzanian security forces began to demarcate the place and essentially signaling that communities would be removed, and communities resisted that by removing the beacons that had been settled there. And that sparked off violent response from the state, which then unleashed violence through excessive use of force, shooting and live ammunition that was actually directed at people, as well as other forms of violent use of force that resulted in injuries to at least 30 people, and one police officer was killed. And so the brutality and the scale of the force is what prompted us to release a statement calling for the Tanzanian government to hold the security operation as well as stop any demarcation until such time that they've secured prior informed consent from the communities that need to be consulted in a very genuine manner.
I mean, I want to talk about the importance of the language, the text, and how to describe what is going on. Government is saying that it's going to be a protected land. Some have said it's ultimately really in cahoots with some powerful companies from outside of Tanzania who are looking to build a game reserve. What will be the effect of this on people who've, as we've mentioned, been on this land, ancestral land, for more than a decade or century, really? Does that mean that they have, because I understand the changing now means that it won't allow human settlement or grazing?
Yeah. Well, any move that is carried out before consultation has been undertaken and without remedies put in place to determine livelihoods after people have been resettled or removed from where they are now, essentially means you are denying people an opportunity for livelihood. And that will be reckless because you are moving large groups of people from one area that they have historically settled on. this will be a second time since the 1950s that the Maasai people will be moved, and that's why they are resisting being moved from where they are now in Loliondo to anywhere else. The second thing is that we have to know that the historical context that in 1992, the Tanzanian government leased the whole Loliondo division as a hunting block to a company from the United Arab Emirates. And that is the context that we have here. And then recently, there's been attempts again to move Maasai people from this area, because in 2009, in 2013, and 2017, there were attempts to forcibly move Maasai communities from the area, resulting at least in 4 villages being targeted, including the Kitale and Arash regions, villages in the area. And so we are seeing a situation of continued relentless desire to make way or to consider economic interest to trump livelihoods and future prospects for a group of people that have relied on land for grazing, but also relied on land for their way of life. There is a court case on 25 September 2018, the East Africa Court of Justice actually issued very clear instructions to the government of Tanzania when a case had been brought before it to cease any operations that included evictions of people until the case was determined, because a group of Maasai community members had brought a case against government to the court, and the court is supposed to make its final decisions on the 22nd of June, which is essentially next week. So the pace at which the government is trying to move ahead of a court decision is suspicious. So we here have a situation where the Tanzanian government ought to halt this security operation, ought to investigate the human rights violations that have taken place, and really bring the perpetrators to book in fair trials and competent courts.
Now, as we mentioned, that the Ngorongoro conservation area is a UNESCO heritage site, and UNESCO has denied asking the Maasai to be moved. Deprose Muchena, thank you very much. He's Amnesty International Regional Director for East and Southern Africa.